At the beginning of the movie, a mysterious murder situation is shown at Grand Central Station, but it's actually a surreal dream that is experienced by a guy, Dylan. As he wakes up startled and goes about his daily activities, he watches news about a star named Hamlin that went out 30 years ago, but whose light is still reaching Earth 30 years later, and how this supernova will affect both Earth and its people. The next scene shows Dylan riding a bike to work and making his way to Grand Central Station to catch the train. He works as an air traffic controller, who has a keen eye for pattern recognition, which helps him in predicting coordinates and saving flying aircrafts from colliding. He goes out drinking with his co-workers after work and gets a ticket to an aerial ballet as a birthday present. He continues his work the next day as usual, when his world surprisingly comes to an end at precisely 2:22 p.m., which distracts him from guiding the flying planes for safe landing. As a result, he nearly causes a mid-air collision between the two aircraft while genuinely trying to prevent it. Due to his unfortunate irresponsibility, he is suspended from his work for almost killing over 900 people. The day after he was suspended, he visits the aerial ballet, where he meets a beautiful young girl, Sarah. After they enter a restaurant and begin conversing, Dylan reveals to Sarah that his father was a pilot and that, despite his training, he was unable to pursue his dream of becoming a pilot due to his fear of flying. Sarah informs him that the Howard Pace Art Gallery is where she works. In addition, he informs her of his work suspension, and it is revealed by Sarah that she was on the jet that came dangerously close to colliding with the other aircraft at 2:22 p.m. While Sarah was grateful to Dylan for saving her life, Dylan felt regret about the occurrence. They confess to one another as they leave that, despite it being only their first date, they felt a strong bond and had known each other for ages. The next day, Dylan is traveling to Grand Central when he witnesses the same events: a siren, a woman laughing, construction noises, a man saying, "Can I help you with," glass breaking, etc. At 2:21 p.m., he hears of the Millhurst Express boarding announcement and witnesses a businessman reading his newspaper, a couple hugging each other, a line of preschoolers, where the last child in line drops something, and a pregnant woman beneath the clock. At precisely 2:22 p.m., the station window breaks. He goes to see Sarah and extends an invitation to go to an early dinner in Central Park together. Dylan learns from Sarah that she was a ballet dancer student before suffering an unsteady landing that tore 2 ligaments in her knees. Dylan lifts Sarah's spirits by improvising a speaker out of a paper cup and an ice cream cone holder, then they dance and share a kiss. They also go to Dylan's apartment and spend the night together. Dylan questions Sarah about her necklace the following morning, to which she responds that it belonged to her ex-boyfriend Jonas, who also happens to be the head artist of the gallery where she works. When Dylan inquires about Sarah's birth date, they discover that they were both born on April 18, 1986, and that in just 1 week, they will both turn 30. At precisely 9:15 a.m., Dylan hears a car smash on the road under his flat. He informs Sarah that this is the 3rd day in a row that the same thing has happened. Dylan rides in a taxi to Grand Central, driven by an inattentive driver. Dylan urges the driver to stop the cab while he takes the shorter route, and he observes the identical sequence of the siren, a woman laughing, sounds of construction, and a man asking, "Can I help you with?" The cab driver becomes enraged when Dylan yells for the vehicle to stop, and turns around to reprimand Dylan for his outburst. At that moment, they are struck by another vehicle, shattering the glass windows of the cab. Dylan visits Grand Central Station despite his injuries, and observes the same sequence of events. He describes these recurring patterns to Sarah, but with distinct individuals performing the same tasks. Despite her lack of belief in Dylan, Sarah assists him in dressing his injuries from the vehicle crash. When Dylan gets home, he begins writing about everything that happened to him that day, beginning at 9:10 a.m. A water drop, an insect dying, a jet passing overhead, etc., and he soon discovers that everything follows a pattern that keeps happening. When Dylan visits the gallery in search of Sarah, he discovers that Jonas's artwork is the centerpiece of the show, who is Sarah's ex-boyfriend. Dylan notices that Jonas's light holographic exhibition about Grand Central Station mirrors exactly what he has been through in the last few days: the announcement of Millhurst Express's boarding, a businessman reading his newspaper, a couple embracing, a preschool line where the last child in line drops something, and a pregnant woman beneath the clocks. Since Dylan is the only one who is aware of these events, Dylan believes Jonas is stalking him. After attacking Jonas, he confronts him about whether he was tracking him, which sparks a fight. The owner of the Kiefer Gallery appears in the crowd and he applauds, adding that the murder at Grand Central Station 30 years ago was a fantastic idea, and that his gallery has an exhibit about it. After apologizing to Jonas for Dylan's attack, Sarah decides to pause her relationship with Dylan. Later that evening, Dylan texts Sarah to ask for her forgiveness. He discovers a concealed stack of envelopes in his house in the meanwhile. He learns that these letters were written to a woman named Evelyn, by a man named Jake Redmond. Dylan investigates and discovers that Evelyn was a singer, and although they were both lovers, Jake was a criminal who was never found guilty, because the police could not uncover enough evidence to prosecute him. Dylan also discovers an article on the internet that claims, on April 18, 1986, the day Dylan and Sarah were born, Jack had shot Evelyn and another policeman dead in the Grand Central Station during a jealous outburst, and Jake was also gunned down by other policemen. After that, Dylan goes to see Evelyn's sister, who offers him a stack of letters Jack sent to Evelyn, since she couldn't stand to read them. She also shows Dylan the necklace she is wearing, claiming it's all she needs to bring her memories back. The necklace matches the one Dylan had observed Sarah wearing exactly. She also informs him that Noah, the police officer, appeared to be in love with Evelyn, and that he was transporting her to Millhurst, in order to protect her from Jake. When Dylan arrives at Grand Central Station to purchase a ticket for the Millhurst Express, he is informed that the train is now called the Poughkeepsie Express, and that the service was discontinued 30 years ago. Precisely at 2:22 p.m., the chandelier falls to the ground. After making the connection, Dylan discovers that Sarah was Evelyn and that, on April 18 at 2:22 p.m., he would murder her at Grand Central Station, since Dylan was Jake in a previous life. He understands that the sequence of events he has been witnessing has been building toward their eventual demise. When he explains this to Sarah, she doesn't think he's telling the truth. She attempts to calm Dylan down, but he won't stop insisting that they split up, because he will kill Sarah soon, even though he knows they are soulmates. Dylan muses over his failed attempt at suicide, as a distressed Sarah searches Jonas's flat. In an attempt to make Sarah feel better about the split, Jonas offers to take her to Millhurst. Jonas and Sarah's trip to Millhurst is cancelled the following day, so they have to go to Grand Central Station, and board a train instead. While Dylan is searching for Sarah, he goes into Jonas's apartment, and discovers that Jonas knows Sarah from his previous life as Evelyn, and that he was Noah. Dylan discovers that Jonas, aka Noah, is crazy about Sarah, aka Evelyn, and that he is carrying a gun. He immediately heads to Grand Central Station, in an attempt to visit her. He draws the attention of the police while traveling, and guides them to his destination. Sarah attempts to leave the Grand Central Station, after realizing that the patterns Dylan had noticed were accurate, but she is stopped by a crazy Jonas, who is referring to her as Evelyn. He wants Sarah to confess that she loves him, but Sarah says no, just as Dylan enters the station. Jonas, believing that Sarah had called him there, becomes outraged and approaches Dylan with a gun, while Sarah witnesses the events as Dylan had described them to her, and realizes she is the pregnant woman standing under the clock. In order to ensure that Dylan and Sarah cannot have each other, Jonas points his gun at Dylan first, then Sarah, stating that, "She'll never be yours." Dylan protects Sarah just in time, but at 2:21 p.m., he is shot. The events from 30 years ago recur, with Jake aka Dylan defending Evelyn against Noah, and at precisely 2:22 p.m., the police that followed Dylan there, shoot Jonas. Dylan collapses into Evelyn's arms as well, briefly closing his eyes to see visions of Jake and Evelyn cuddling. After he did not pass away, Sarah glances at the clock at 2:23 p.m., and reports that they survived. It turns out that Jake was set up to kill Noah and Evelyn, because the police wanted to protect Noah's reputation as one of them and a police detective. In addition, the dying star that Hamlin alluded to at the beginning of the film, eventually vanishes, but is quickly replaced by a new star. The closing scene depicts Dylan and Sarah as happy, with Dylan having conquered his phobia of flying and becoming a pilot, and Sarah grinning lovingly at their infant in the cradle.